In this video, we're going to take a look at why and how you can go about learning arpeggios. Hello and welcome to AxeTuts, the show where we explore guitar playing and music theory to take our playing to the next level. I'm your host, Ray George. I've introduced arpeggios in a previous video quite some time ago, but I wanted to revisit it from a different angle because I think that they can be a great way of potentially deepening your understanding of music theory and a great device to use in your playing, which should of course aid your creativity and ability to express yourself on the instrument. In order to understand this topic fully, it would be best to first have a good understanding of the major scale, intervals, and what diatonic chords are, as all of these concepts are needed to explain and understand and use what's going on in this video. If you're not up to scratch on all of those subjects, you might want to check out some of the other videos that I've put up on those topics. You can find them in the playlist in the cards above. But otherwise, to start off, why should you learn arpeggios? You hear it a lot when studying music, like the classic line from the AxeTuts, "You must learn your scales and your arpeggios." But just like scales, which I covered in another video, in my experience of early music lessons, it was never really explained why they're good or necessary to learn, and more importantly, how to use them in your playing. In order to understand why they're so helpful, let's first clarify what they are. It's pretty simple if you understand chords, because essentially that is what they are. Just instead of playing the chords like the notes from the chord simultaneously, we play them and look at them as a group of single notes like we would a scale. So if you know how diatonic chords are constructed, then you should also know how arpeggios are constructed. Understanding this and knowing how to play them on your instrument could, as I said, potentially broaden your understanding of music theory and therefore open up your playing along with it, which was my personal experience. Some examples of how they are useful include being able to understand and eventually use note targeting effectively. I'm sure you've heard this being applied by other musicians, like when you hear a melody line or solo and the notes just seem to fit really kind of perfectly over the chord changes. That's because they're playing chord tones, also known as target notes or arpeggios, on the strong beats of the bar or when the chord change comes around. So this emphasizes the chord changes and creates that sound of the melody moving perfectly with the chords. Another thing that they can be helpful with, if you don't understand them already, is modes. For a long time, I understood what modes were and generally how they worked, but it wasn't until I looked at them from the point of view of arpeggios that I felt I understood them on a more musical level and could start having fun using them. Arpeggios can also be a great way to just move from one register or area of the fretboard to another that sounds and feels really good to play. You hear arpeggiac movement in melodies and solos all the time. So if you want to create that sound and be able to move from one octave to another in a musical way, arpeggios. As well as that, they can also be used in a more, let's say, complex way, where you superimpose them over a given chord. So this means using an arpeggio that is different from the chord that's currently being played, which again is going to create a certain sound or effect. That is just another tool for your creativity. So hopefully all of that is enough to convince you that they are useful, even vital for you to learn. Of course, there's no way I'm going to fit all of those applications into one video, but what I'd like to do is explore these different approaches in subsequent videos. For now, let's just take a look at a brief overview of how you can start just practicing and learning them on the guitar. Again, if you've already learnt the major scale in all of its forms, it shouldn't be too tricky to start learning some arpeggios. At least all the arpeggios which are diatonic to major keys, most notably major, minor, and dominant seventh arpeggios. This is because within each major scale form, you'll find the arpeggio forms for those chords. You just have to take out a few notes. For instance, this is the C major scale in form 1 or the second position. If you take out all the Ds, Fs, and As, we'll get this. Which is the C major 7th arpeggio, form 1. You can do the same for all 7 forms of the major scale. Here's C major scale, form 2 in the 3rd position. And again, with the Ds, Fs and As taken out, we get this. You can do this for each type of chord that's diatonic to the scale. For instance, the 2 chord in C major is D minor 7th, which are the notes D, F, A, and C. If we take the first form of C major again and remove the notes that aren't in D minor 7th, which are E, G, and B, we'll be left with this. That was the D minor 7th arpeggio. So that's how you can fairly easily work out the fingerings for yourself. Of course, you could also just look up the charts for all of these. And if you'd like a more comprehensive worksheet with all of the charts and pretty much as many exercises as you'll need for arpeggios, you can check out my Patreon page. In order to start practicing them, I would recommend taking one arpeggio type, for instance, the minor 7th, and learn it in each of its 7 forms one at a time, making sure that you can play each one ascending, descending, and in any position on the guitar. Here's one exercise that could help you with that. Once you can play each form, work on moving from one to the other, something like this. And another exercise you can try to really check that you've got them under your fingers is to play them over the cycle of fourths. That is to say that the roots move through the cycle of fourths. Make sure to use the closest form to the position that you start in for each successive arpeggio, something like this. That's just a few ways to practice. As I said earlier, if you would like a much more comprehensive guide with notation and tabs and a bunch more exercises, you'll be able to download them over on my Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the cards and in the video description. Once you start getting a grasp of playing a particular arpeggio, you can then move on to one of those next videos that I mentioned, once I've uploaded them, and start learning how to actually put them to use. Otherwise, that's about it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, I'd love to know by way of you hitting that like button or dropping me a comment, and feel free to ask any questions or requests that you might have too. If this is one of the first of my videos that you've watched, I'd like to welcome you to my channel, where I'll keep sharing things like this so that as guitarists we can keep finding inspiration and musical tools to become more free on the instrument. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up to date. What?